Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel, wishing you a pleasant listening experience. In life, many people don't consider themselves biased. Even when someone points out discrepancies in their understanding, they tend to think the other person misunderstood them. Observing around us, gender discrimination in the workplace is prevalent. For instance, many job postings for drivers subtly indicate a preference for men. Companies believe that most women are prone to accidents, hence choosing men for long-term stability. However, statistically speaking, the accident rate for male drivers is 8.8 times higher than for female drivers. In other hardcore positions, like programmers or mechanical engineers, companies tend to extend more opportunities to men. They perceive men as tougher and less likely to invest excessive energy in their families. If you were standing in the company's position, whom would you prefer to promote, women or men? Everyone likely has their own answer, but the undeniable reality is that most people have some form of stereotype. Women might climb high, but in the end, they're expected to return home, seen as a waste of resources to invest in deeply. Men are expected to provide for the family, dedicating themselves fully to work with stronger commitment. This kind of stereotype is a form of bias, termed as the laziness of the mind by Gordon W. Allport, renowned American psychologist considered the father of personality psychology. It arises without delving into or exploring the underlying logic, simply applying blunt labels. Just as in our daily lives, we all have some stereotypes. For instance, thinking all Dallas people are generous, Mexicans love spicy food, or Europeans have open-minded thoughts, etc. But how do these stereotypes, even biases, form? And how do they infiltrate our minds? What impacts do they have on individuals, groups, and even international relations? If there are various misconceptions about biases, then the essence of bias that we're interpreting today is the book that holds the sought-after answers. This book not only receives praise from readers, but also garners accolades from numerous scholars. Elliot Aronson, the author of The Social Animal, referred to this book as having influenced an entire generation of social psychologists. Harvard University psychology professor, Mahzarin Banaji, stated that in the 65 years since its publication, no other work has matched its influence. What magical power does this book, published half a century ago, hold that it continues to receive constant acclaim? Today, let's follow in Gordon's footsteps to explore the deeper logic behind bias and learn how to deal with it. What is bias? Searching for bias in the search bar on a web page, one would find the official definition indicating a negative and unfair attitude held towards a person or group. However, Gordon believes this definition lacks accuracy because, rigorously speaking, bias encompasses two fundamental characteristics. Firstly, there's a dislike attitude, where an individual unilaterally negatively assesses certain people or things. For instance, someone might say, "I dislike people who eat wild animals." Secondly, there's a generalized belief, simplistically extending this attitude from an individual to a group. For example, the reason behind disliking people who eat wild animals might be a belief that these individuals lack empathy. Combining a negative attitude with a belief forms bias. Strangely, holders of bias often confidently display their beliefs, seemingly unaware of any flaws in their thinking. If we revisit the traits of bias, we'll uncover the underlying process of its formation. Why do humans have bias and find it challenging to detect flaws in their thinking? It's determined by how we perceive the world. Our brains need categorization to think, and once these categories are established, it's inevitable to make judgments during the thinking process. Life's order is established on this basis. For instance, when attending a company's annual meeting with 3 people from different departments at the table, our brain might quickly categorize them. A has long hair, B wears purple, and C wears earrings. Instantly, we identify who these 3 individuals are. Some might argue that this predisposed thinking style affects our judgment. However, in reality, the benefits of categorization outweigh the drawbacks significantly. Firstly, categorization guides us in adapting to daily life. Most of the time, we adapt to various events through categorization. Seeing an aggressive dog barking, we categorize it as a rabid dog and keep our distance. Observing a dark sky, we predict it might rain and carry an umbrella when leaving. Various events unfold daily, and without the brain's categorization process, orderly living becomes impossible. Secondly, categorization allows us to quickly identify related objects and assign different emotional hues to them. For instance, a cat is a concept formed by our knowledge about cats. It's not just a concept, but also an emotional symbol. Even if we don't know what a specific breed of cat looks like, upon hearing a name containing cat, we experience a different feeling. Fundamentally, categorization is an instinctive behavior of understanding the unknown with our existing knowledge to make life safer by reducing unknown variables. It's a reflex of the brain. Perhaps horror movie enthusiasts can relate. Like in a movie plot, the scariest part isn't the ghost itself, but the atmosphere before its appearance. Both categorization and horror movies confirm one adage: fear stems from the unknown. By now, one might understand how bias emerges. Strangely, many people, when faced with conflicting evidence against their categories, still refuse to change their thoughts. Why? Because our brains have established existing categories that are convenient to use, and are therefore reluctant to change. When new evidence aligns with our previous judgments, we selectively incorporate it under our categorized labels. For instance, if we discover that a newly met Mexican does indeed love spicy food, it reinforces our initial judgment, making us feel content. But if our judgments are contradicted, a common psychological mechanism emerges, allowing people to maintain previous beliefs despite conflicting evidence, known as secondary defense. When reality doesn't match our brain's categories, holders of bias don't investigate further, but rather close themselves off, stubbornly sticking to their choices. Interestingly, in discussions about racial discrimination, several instances of secondary defense have surfaced. For instance, someone strongly biased against black people. Upon hearing friends discuss the advantages or beneficial facts about black individuals, might retort, "Do you want to marry a black person?" If the friend hesitates or declines, the biased individual feels vindicated. "See, you wouldn't want to live with a black person either." Thus, although categorization is a rational thinking process of the brain, it itself exhibits emotional coloring. Within this process, personal values lead us to make baseless judgments and classifications, thus forming bias. So, what impact does bias have on our lives? How does it spread? Let's delve deeper. How does bias affect our lives? When bias forms towards something or a group, it implies that an individual has created a complete cause and effect relationship. For instance, if someone says, "These people eat wild animals, so they lack compassion," their future encounters, they'll either reinforce or propagate this bias through validation. For example, if someone hears that a colleague from a certain department received criticism, they might disregard the facts and instead bring up an incident from years ago about them eating wild animals, saying, "I've always known. Seeing them eat wild animals made me think they're not good people." If you were this colleague, would you accept or respond to this statement after thinking it through? Some might choose to respond by pointing out the facts behind the criticism, but many would simply accept it. Gordon describes it as a social passport, because many who adopt a conforming attitude do so just to avoid confrontation. Going along with the crowd seems better than spoiling everyone's mood. But even if people merely conform to bias, it influences others' choices. For instance, Gordon mentions a store owner who, considering reputation and profit, refuses to employ black people as staff. "Why should I be the first one to do this? What will my customers say?" The owner might not see this as bias, but as catering to customer preferences. However, this behavior constitutes discrimination. Nonetheless, the destructive power of bias isn't limited to this. After all, hardly anyone harbors ill intentions without revealing them. The stronger the feeling of dislike, the more likely it leads to intense hostile behavior. Levels of bias. Gordon categorized negative behaviors based on severity, allowing us to gauge where our biases might fall. 1. Hateful speech. This is a milder form where individuals express dislike toward other groups casually in conversations with friends or strangers. For instance, friends might mock a competitor of their favorite star, or coworkers might tease a particular character during office gossip. It's a harmless bias intended to bridge distances. 2. Avoidance. More intense biases lead individuals to actively avoid or inconvenience themselves when interacting with the biased group. They refrain from attacking the biased group, but silently endure the negative consequences of their avoidance. For instance, when a university invites a distinguished scholar who happens to be homosexual, some homophobic students refuse to attend. 3. Discrimination. Here, biased individuals deny certain people or groups the equal rights they deserve. For instance, a boss who refuses to hire black individuals, or a bully isolating a student at school, are examples of discrimination. 4. Physical assault. In emotionally charged situations, bias can lead to violent behavior. Incidents like campus violence or societal unrest often stem from biased behaviors. Assaults resulting from racial discrimination, such as a Chinese coffee shop employee in Canada being scalded by a white couple, exemplify this level. 5. Ethnic cleansing. This extreme level involves lynching, killing, or massacres due to biases. It represents the ultimate degree of violence due to prejudice. Perhaps the most infamous example is Hitler's genocidal plan during the Holocaust. These 5 levels highlight how biased attitudes and beliefs can lead to a wide range of hatred, varying in intensity. While many linger in speech or avoidance, stepping up to the next level is much easier. The influence between groups magnifies hatred, as seen with Hitler's rhetoric leading Germans to avoid their Jewish neighbors, eventually resulting in discriminatory laws and violent attacks, culminating in the Holocaust's horrors. Looking at the societal consequences, many social biases seem relatively harmless as they exist merely in people's conversations. However, with the development of the internet, our world has become a collective, making the friction between us increasingly pronounced and our patience for each other steadily decreasing. How to change ourselves and eliminate bias? How can we change ourselves and eliminate bias? This becomes our next subject. 1. How to eliminate personal bias. The significance of family environments in children's psychological well-being is crucial. Gordon believes that a child is like a blank slate at birth. Their growth depends on the education and environmental influence received at home. Not everyone is inherently biased. Many times, biases are learned through subtle influence in the family or school environment. For instance, some families may have a dominant father with a hot temper, always bossing around the mother, promoting the stereotype that women should solely manage household chores and children. In certain regions, archaic customs dictate that women shouldn't eat at the same table as men. Children raised in such environments might perceive these behaviors as normal and embed biases within themselves. We are all both holders and victims of biases. Are there feasible actions to eliminate biases? Gordon outlines 4 methods in his book. 1. Be mindful of information dissemination, whether addressing friends or the public. Being neutral in information delivery is crucial. While good teachers and parents shape individuals positively, the transmission of information often carries an attitude. Encouraging cross-cultural education while guiding children through literature, movies, and other mediums can help them understand similarities among human groups, shaping their perspectives positively. 2. Engage in local activities. Volunteering or participating in local events offers exposure to diverse groups and societal layers. Understanding various lifestyles might foster more tolerant attitudes among individuals. 3. Utilize mass media. The stimulus-stimulus principle in psychology implies that media must create movements rather than isolated programs to cause an impact. Recent social movements such as Me Too and LGBT, starting from obscurity and gaining substantial traction, have had a massive influence. 4. Leverage legal means. Addressing workplace inequalities using legal measures not only defends individual rights, but also makes companies aware of the hefty costs associated with gender discrimination. In essence, besides relying on societal efforts, maintaining an open mind is crucial. Continuously improving personal values through learning and exposure aids in building one's spiritual core. This enables individuals to face anything with an open and clear mindset. Alright, so far, we've got a good understanding of the book's content. Let's summarize briefly. Firstly, bias refers to an unfair and irrational negative attitude towards a person or group. It's a default mode of the brain and has two features, aversion and generalized beliefs. When reality clashes with these beliefs, the holders tend to become like ostriches, closing themselves off. Secondly, bias severity has 5 levels: hate speech, avoidance, discrimination, physical attacks, and ethnic cleansing. Group influences magnify hatred, making it easier for biases to progress to the next stage, resulting in severe consequences. Finally, eliminating bias requires collective participation in social organizations. Neutral information transmission helps avoid misinterpretations. Engaging in local community activities helps eliminate barriers and biases by understanding diverse lifestyles. Mass media is an effective tool for controlling bias. By launching movements to engage more people, governments can legislate to eradicate societal discrimination. As members of society, we can't evade bias. It's like a kaleidoscope, showing a different world to each observer. Hence, everyone has different perspectives on the same thing. Since we understand that it's an unavoidable aspect of personal growth, why not take the initiative to understand bias? Half of it involves vigilance, learning to detect and respond to biases to avoid falling into traps. The other half involves taking control, choosing to understand biases in different groups, maintaining an open mindset, and continually updating our cognitive repository. This is how we progress together with the world. Well, that wraps up everything for today. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to meeting you in the next book. Congratulations, you've finished another book. Thanks for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom and practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future together. Thank you all. Goodbye.